So how did this goofy-looking weirdo start a sex cult with a bunch of college students? Now, the goofy-looking weirdo, his name is Larry, and Larry is 50 during this time, living in New York, and one day, I guess he decides, I'm gonna start a cult. And so Larry gets out of prison, because I guess he had been in prison for a while for being a con artist, and he goes to stay with his daughter, this girl, Talia. Now, Talia is a college sophomore, and she lives on campus with some other students in a dormitory. And Larry just suddenly shows up to the dorms one day, and he's like hanging out in the common area and crashing on the couch every night. And I guess Talia's friends are like, that's a little weird, but okay. But whatever, I guess he's only supposed to stay a few days. But bro, I guess just overstays his welcome, and he starts living there in the building. And over time, he becomes friends with Talia's dorm mates. And they start trusting him and looking to him as this wise older man who they can come to for advice. And of course they trust him. He tells them he's a life coach, and he'll coach them on things like handling breakups and dealing with depression and stuff like that. And he'll tell them all about his wild adventures in the Marine Corps when he worked as an international spy on secret missions with the CIA, which is absolute bullshit. He never did any of that, but the students buy it. They think he is super cool. And they know that he just got out of prison, but Larry makes up some nonsense excuse that he only got sent to prison because the elites in the government were trying to silence him. Yeah, okay, Larry. Regardless, he must be a really charming guy, because it only takes a few months for these students to completely fall under his spell. And they'll basically do anything he asks. And so Larry has made this little group of college students into his personal cult. Now, to be clear, this is just a small group of students during this time, like 4 or 5. Students outside this little circle who live in the dorm, some of them think Larry is creepy as fuck. Some of them even email the school, warning them like, hey, there's this old creep living in the dorms. And in response, the school does nothing. Not sure why. But anyway, the semester eventually ends, and now it's 2011. And that summer, Larry and a gang of about 7 students, they end up moving into a 1-bedroom apartment about 30 minutes away in Manhattan. And so there's 8 people total living in this 1-bedroom place. And 2 of the girls sleep in the bed with Larry, because of course they do, and I guess the rest of the students sleep in the living room. And there is where their cult activities really start taking shape. Like, Larry does these really intense therapy sessions with the students, and he records it. He also starts pushing them around and depriving them of sleep. He gives them drugs like Adderall to make them hyper-paranoid. And if the students challenge Larry or talk back to him, he threatens to show everyone the videos from his therapy sessions with them. So ultimately, they all fall in line. And of course, by this point, Larry is making the girls in the group smash with him. Because I guess that's just what cult leaders do. He also makes the students smash with each other, and he films it. And if they step out of line, he threatens to release the footage to the students' parents. And this goes on all summer. And by the time fall semester starts, it's time for the students to go back to school. But only Talia, Larry's daughter, goes back to live in the dorm. The rest of them stay there in the 1-bedroom apartment with Larry. And this is where things get really crazy. Because he increases his control over them, and he gets physically violent. And he somehow manipulates them into making false confessions on video, like confessions about destroying Larry's stuff, confessions about committing crimes that never happened. Then he uses the videos of these false confessions to blackmail them. He convinces them that they need to pay him money to make up for everything they did wrong. Otherwise, he's going to take those taped confessions straight to the police. And crazy enough, the students actually do pay him money because they think that if they don't, they're going to go to jail. Some of them withdraw tens of thousands of dollars from their parents' savings accounts and they give it to him. One girl convinces her parents to sell their house to get out of debt with Larry. And if any of them start to push back too hard, Larry physically manhandles them until they fall in line. One time, he gets so mad that he actually puts a plastic bag over one of the girls' heads and he nearly suffocates her. Another time, he gets mad at one of the students and he puts pliers on the student's tongue.
Do you think I'm playing with you? Huh? You're a grown man, I'm a grown man. I don't like what you did. You hear me? Now one more time and I'm going to split your tongue in half. Do you understand me?
And so Larry keeps taking these payments off the students, the members of his little cult that he built, and he blackmails them to pay him back for crimes they didn't ever commit. And they're paying him all the money they can get their hands on. And pretty quickly, Larry has made over $1 million off of these students. $1 million! Like what? Now, eventually, they get kicked out of their one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. And in 2013, Larry and some of the followers, they moved from Manhattan all the way down to North Carolina, temporarily, to a house that one of his family members owns. And here, he becomes an even bigger asshole. He forces his followers to do, like, manual labor, like working in the yard and, like, digging ditches, stuff like that. He also starts demanding that they contact outside family members to give them money that they then can give to him. Then, in 2014, I guess they move back to Manhattan, and he's still demanding money from them. One girl doesn't have the money to pay him that he claims she owes him, so he somehow forces her to work at a sex club, and she ends up becoming a full-blown escort, and all the money she makes escorting goes to pay off her made-up debt with Larry. So in 4 years, off of just her being an escort and him taking her money, Larry makes $2.5 million. Oh, but it gets worse. This little college student cult he started is so insane, and this is so stressful for these students involved. At different points in time, 5 of his followers tried to unalive themselves. And eventually, one of them is, unfortunately, successful. Think about that. There are only like 7 members total in this cult, and 5 of them tried to unalive themselves. So I don't know what's keeping these guys in this crazy situation, but it seems like they're never going to get out. Until by 2018, things get so bad, it finally dawns on these students that if they don't get themselves out of this, they're probably going to die. And so one by one, most of the members start finding the strength to escape. And the one member who Larry pushed into being an escort, one of her clients gives her money and resources to escape to Philadelphia. And there, she finally meets up with police and she tells them all about this crazy sex cult Larry's been running. A few months later, in 2020, police go to his apartment and bam, they arrest him. Here's his mugshot. And they charge him with sex trafficking and extortion and racketeering. And since he was dumb enough to record a lot of his own cult practices, he's eventually found guilty and he gets sentenced to 60 years in prison. Wow. Do you remember when a bunch of billionaires died and like the whole internet celebrated? Well, it all starts with this guy. His name's Stockton. And Stockton is a pilot and an engineer, but what he really wants to do is explore the universe, like Captain Kirk on Star Trek. But one day in 2004, when he's 42 years old, he decides to do just that. Except he's gonna start specifically underwater. And so he starts renting private submarines to travel down into the deep. And he is shocked at how few submarine rentals there are out there. And so after a little research, he starts thinking, hey, I'll build a private submarine myself and I'll let people rent it from me. So in 2009, that's what he does. Stockton starts his own company, OceanGate.
Hi, my name is Stockton Rush. I'm the CEO and founder of OceanGate.
Then in 2016, he and OceanGate start taking tourists in a small submarine to tour underwater ruins from this Italian shipwreck. That's pretty cool. But that's apparently not enough for Stockton. He's thinking bigger. He wants to take tourists down to a destination that's really hard to get to. A destination that's going to get his company a lot of buzz and attention. That destination, the wreckage of the Titanic. And so Stockton gets to work and he starts designing a submarine that can withstand the pressure of the ocean at 13,000 feet deep. And old school standard submarines, they're too expensive and way too big. And Stockton, he wants his to be cheap. And so, boom, he starts building it. He apparently cuts some corners on the material he uses on it, and he adds a bunch of other pre-made parts so that OceanGate can save some money. And he also installs a Logitech video game controller to steer it. Now, he does get a lot of criticism for this, but I actually looked into it, and it's apparently not uncommon to use Logitech video game controllers to control certain parts of submarines. So he's not entirely crazy for installing one on his, apparently. Anyway, once it's built, he calls this new submarine Titan, and it ends up being about the size of an SUV. And so Stockton tests the Titan without anyone inside to see if it can withstand the pressure, and actually, it holds up. And so it looks like his dreams are gonna come true. He's actually gonna get to explore the ruins of the Titanic. Until... not everyone is on board with Stockton's Titanic submarine plans. Particularly this guy, David. And David is an employee at OceanGate. And so David looks at the Titan and he immediately sees some things that could ultimately turn into a leak. And so David lets it be known, and he brings all these serious safety concerns up in a meeting with all the bosses at OceanGate. He's like, this sub, it isn't strong enough. And he insists that they get it inspected and certified by the American Bureau of Shipping to verify that it's safe and up to standard. But I guess Stockton is like, nah, that won't be necessary, because he feels that most accidents are caused by mistakes made by the operator, not by the equipment. And so getting extra inspections won't really matter. And then, boom, they immediately fire David and they give him 10 minutes to clear out his desk, and then they escort him out of the building. I guess they really did not like being questioned. Regardless, now that no one is poking holes in this business plan, Stockton can move forward with testing the Titan with an actual human inside, and of course he insists on taking it down first, by himself. And so he takes the Titan down, and everything seems to be going fine. But then, once the Titan is around 10,000 feet down, suddenly, bam, it loses all communication with the support crew on the surface. But Stockton, he isn't scared. He's down in the submarine looking out the little window and seeing all this magical deep sea shit that makes him feel like he's finally living his childhood dream of becoming Captain Kirk. But anyway, he eventually pilots the sub back up until he gets communication back. Now, that little test run would suggest that this sub isn't exactly safe. But old Stockton, he doesn't seem to be bothered by this. In fact, at one point, he's quoted as saying, you know, at some point, safety is just pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed. Oh boy. So anyway, in 2021, Stockton and OceanGate start taking tourists down to see the wreckage of the Titanic. All for the low, low price of $250,000 a person. So basically, you gotta be super wealthy to engage in this. And they take, I believe, 13 expeditions down to see the wreckage, and most of these trips are, in fact, successful. However, they do lose communication with the surface a bunch of times during some of them, and apparently the Titan has over 118 different major and minor technical issues, including one time the battery died and passengers got trapped inside the sub for 27 whole hours. Which is definitely enough to make me say, f*** all that, but I don't know, I guess these billionaires are just built different because they keep paying the money and they keep going. And by 2023, Stockton and his company OceanGate, they're getting a lot of attention from the news media. So this is great for him. I mean, more media means more attention and therefore more customers. And so that summer, Titan heads out for its next expedition. Another trip to see the Titanic. And 5 people are supposed to go on this trip. Stockton and 4 others. And they aren't all billionaires. Only 2 of them are actually billionaires. One of them is actually one of the billionaire's 19-year-old son, and one of the guys is a Titanic expert. And so all 5 of these people get in the sub and it takes off and it starts to submerge. And everything's going fine. And over an hour goes by, and so far, so good, everything's going as planned. In fact, the sub sends a message to the support crew on the surface saying, all good here. And so, I assume they're all chilling in this tiny little sub, looking out the windows or whatever, checking out the fish. And then, suddenly, out of nowhere, boom, they lose power. And the Titan slowly tilts, and it starts to nosedive toward the ocean floor. And all the passengers are now sitting in the pitch dark like, what the fuck is going on? And this goes on for about 60 seconds. And now they're panicking. Like, why did they lose power? Is this the end for them? And then, boom, the Titan implodes, and it crushes everyone like a soda can. I guess it wasn't constructed right, and it was under too much underwater pressure. And all 5 people on board die instantly. And it's not dramatic, it's not long and drawn out suffering, it's instant death within milliseconds. So they felt nothing. And here is actually footage of a piece of the sub they later found on the ocean floor. Now, there is some speculation that the 5 passengers did not lose power before the sub imploded, that it just imploded instantly and there was no panicking and no darkness or anything like that. But the truth is, we actually don't know for sure. And so then this story breaks and it's all over the news. And then the internet hears about it and they are ruthless. Like they fucking celebrated these 5 people's demise. Do you remember that? Like the general consensus when this happened was, yeah, fuck those billionaires. Like they deserved it. Like what? And people are like making memes out of it? Tons of memes. Like these people were just trying to explore the ocean and the internet is over here dancing on their grave. It was wild. So how does this horrible murder eventually lead to The Incredibles getting made? Well, it all starts with this guy, Brad. And Brad's around 20 years old during this time, and he's got big dreams. He wants to create an animated movie that ends up being a classic. You know, like Snow White or Jungle Book. And so, in the late 70s, he starts going to college at Cal Arts, studying animation. A few years later, he finally graduates, and boom, he starts working as a screenwriter. But over the years, most of the movies he writes don't get made. But whatever, Brad's not gonna give up. And he works for years. And then, in 1989, Brad's around 32 years old now, something terrible happens that changes his life forever. See, Brad has a sister, this woman, Susan. And Susan's around 37, and she and Brad are really close. But, unfortunately, Susan is in a terrible marriage. And her husband's an absolute piece of shit. I mean, he's awful to her, he's abusive, and she's been trying to get out of this marriage for a while. So, from what I read, Susan and her husband are separated, or at least they're living in different places at this point. But one night, husband comes over to her house, probably to start some shit. And the two of them get into some kind of fight. And this fight gets really bad. And at some point, he gets so mad that he pulls out his pew-pew. And he just, blam, shoots Susan. And then he shoots her again and again. And then he uses it on himself. Blam. And they're both tragically unalived. And as you can imagine, this is devastating for Susan's whole family. And when Brad hears the news, it hits him hard. I mean, he is beyond depressed. He can't function, he stops working, he shuts down and goes into a daze. He's never had to deal with loss like this. This is the worst. And several years pass, and it's around 1996 now, and he's still coping with this loss. But one day, something changes. See, Brad has been working hard for years, and now he has a contract at Warner Brothers to possibly direct an animated movie. And the execs there, they tell him they have a lot of projects in development. Would you like to direct one of these? And one of those projects is based on a novel written in the 60s called The Iron Man. And it's a story about a big metal robot who becomes friends with a small boy. And so Brad's like, all right, let me read this Iron Man novel to see if I'm interested in this movie project. And so he reads it, and he immediately connects with the story, because he relates some of the themes in the book to the passing of his sister. And he starts thinking about the actual gun that was used to unalive Susan. And he thinks, what if something that was designed to kill didn't want to kill? Like, what if a gun had a soul? And so Brad takes this quirky idea to Warner Brothers, and he pitches it. What if a gun had a soul? And in this case, the gun being the big metal robot from the story. A story that's going to eventually become the Iron Giant. And amazingly, the suits at Warner Brothers say yes. And so for the first time, Brad gets the chance to write and direct his first ever feature film. And so, boom, Brad gets to work right away, banging out the screenplay for this. He wants this Iron Giant movie to not just be an animated classic, but he specifically wants it to help people cope with death and loss the same way he had to deal with losing someone he loves. And so he and his team, they start producing this movie, and they work for years on it. I mean, this movie means everything to Brad. And so he carefully works the themes of death into this children's story.
It's dead.
And so the giant learns how to come to terms with loss.
I know you feel bad about the deer, but it's not your fault. Things die. It's part of life.
And if you've ever seen the movie, you already know that it has quite an anti-gun message, which you could obviously tie that back to Brad's situation with losing his sister to gun violence.
It's bad to kill. Guns kill. And you don't have to be a gun.
But anyway, years pass, and it's now 1999, and Brad, he's in his 40s now, but he's still determined to get this movie out to people, to help them, to honor his sister. And Warner Brothers, they haven't released the movie yet, but everyone he screened it to absolutely loves it. The animators love it, the early critics love it. Brad has made several grown men cry by showing them this movie. This could be it. This could become the animated classic that he has always wanted to make. Until the movie premieres and it bombs. And it bombs badly, like really, really badly. Like it cost $50 million to make, but it only made $31 million back. And of course, poor Brad is devastated. I mean, he put years of his life into this movie, and the message was such a personal one to him. And so he starts to wonder, is this it for me? Will I ever direct again? I mean, all these things are going through his head. But then, a few months later, out of nowhere, Brad gets a phone call. And it's from a guy who used to go to school with him back at Cal Arts. This guy, John Lasseter. And John is like, hey bro, loved your work on the Iron Giant. Want to come work at the animation studio that I work at? And Brad's like, alright. Now John just happens to work at a studio that's getting quite a bit of buzz during this time. A studio called Pixar. And so, in the year 2000, Brad comes to work at Pixar, and he reunites with John, his buddy from college.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Brad's here, Pixar.
And here at Pixar, Brad gets another chance of making an animated classic. And he starts thinking about all the years of work that he put into the Iron Giant and how much time he spent away from his wife and kids doing the work he loved. And so he ends up being inspired to write a story about a father who has career ambitions of helping people, but these ambitions create a huge problem for his family. And that story becomes a little movie called The Incredibles. And again, Brad puts his heart and soul into making this movie. Like the father, Mr. Incredible, is sort of designed to look like Brad himself. Brad even voices one of the characters himself, Edna Mode.
If you repress, you depress, darling. To impress, you must express.
And so by 2004, the movie is finally done. But Pixar hasn't released it yet. But again, everyone Brad has screened it to loves it. The animators love it, the early critics love it. Then it premieres, finally. And unlike the Iron Giant, this movie blows the fuck up right away, and it makes a ton of money for Pixar. In fact, it's one of the highest grossing movies of the year, earning $600 million. Not only that, it gets 4 Oscar nominations, and it actually wins one for Best Animated Feature.
The Oscar goes to The Incredibles.
And so finally, Brad has achieved his dream of creating an animated movie classic. And it even gets a sequel and video game spin-offs, and there's like a 3rd movie being made. Plus, over time, the Iron Giant finally starts to get the recognition that it had deserved all along. And it is now considered an animated classic in its own right. And if you pay attention at the end of Iron Giant, if you watch the credits, you can actually see that Brad has dedicated the movie to his sister, Susan.